Well, welcome everyone. Here we go. We're going to start this thing off and wrap it up. This is the World's Greatest Schools webinar number 5. So hopefully we've given you some insight into the layers and the levels and the fundamentals of the building a world's greatest school. Today, we're really excited about this product. It's really creates the magic within our school communities, and we refer to it as belief-driven learning. And we're going to take you through that process today so that you can have that understanding of how your values and beliefs will drive everything that you do, including your instruction. On the far right-hand side of the screen, the 4 fundamentals that we talk about, your shared beliefs and your values are what's going to drive it. You have to create this culture of significance. And on Tuesday, Scott covered the structures and the systems and how everything is driven by those values and beliefs. And then today, we're going to complete the upper level. Please understand that when you put this together, you can go ahead and start at various levels. But what our suggestion is that if you're going to get optimum impact, is that you really need to follow this process. So I'd like to welcome everybody. We're honored again to have 2 amazing educators, Scott Cavanillas.
Good morning, Park.
And Jessica Delavine, who will be really heading this today. And I'm Richard Parkhouse. You know me as Park. We're glad you're here. Let's get this thing started. At the end of our webinar on Tuesday, we had a really great question come up, and the question revolved around getting staff to be able to buy in, and how do you get them to believe that when it starts talking about all kids have futures and that you need to be able to open up access to your honors classes. Well, most of our schools, and I go back to this because this is our greatness inside out process. This is the process that we use when we come into your school to be able to transform the culture. And what we have found is that it's not going to transform, and the transformation will not take place because most of us are working with what's inside of me, our personal values and beliefs. And we all have our own personal values and beliefs. And I'm not saying you don't have those. But most decisions, learning, the things that drive us are really generated by our own personal values and beliefs, and what is my purpose for existing within the school community. What Scott and Jessica have done is this. The reason that they were able to get people to buy in and support the belief-driven learning is because they are operating from the lower right-hand quadrant of outside of us. They have created the values and the beliefs, which are shared amongst all of their staffulty, their students, and their families. So please understand that the questions of being able to get to this point by saying, this will never work at my school. Well, if you're operating at inside of me, you have 100 staff people that are operating within their own realm. This process really transforms into the outside of us, because then the decisions, the practice, the policies, the procedures, our tradition, our culture, everything will fall into line and becomes very simple and very easy. We talked about those 4 levels, and today we're wrapping it up to where we're going to put the icing on the cake, if you will, because this is where the magic really starts, is where you can take your shared beliefs and values and then integrate that into your instructional day. That's when the kids, if you will remember in the earlier session, when the kids would say, yeah, we have an acronym, but we were too cool for that. The difference is the acronym is alive. They live it. they believe it, and it drives everything they do. So without further ado, I'd like to turn this over to Jessica. She is magic when she's able to work with staff and tie in the whole concept of belief-driven learning. It is just absolutely spectacular to walk into the classrooms to watch what is happening. And it's just not one or two, and it's not showcasing 3 or 4 teachers. It is the entire school community. I have never seen anything like this in my 40 years of working with schools. So Scott and Jessica and the staff at Alvarado are to be commended for going above and beyond and creating the world's greatest school. So thank you for your efforts, and thank you for who you are and what you do. And Jessica, it's all yours.
First of all, thank you for sneaking this slide in, Park. Starts me off on a super awkward note. No, but absolutely. If we can disregard the photo in the corner and focus on just the magic of belief-driven learning. I wanted to start, before we actually begin discussing what belief-driven learning looks like, I wanted to start by referencing those fundamental layers of the pyramid, just so that we can ground. One second. I knew I shouldn't have the remote.
No, that was me. Sorry.
Okay. I wanted to reference the fundamental layers of the pyramid, just so we can ground everything that we talk about today, again, in the shared values and beliefs that we've discussed in the first 4 sessions of this webinar series. I'm going to show a couple of examples of how, regardless of what our instructional focus might be as a site for staff learning days, for academic years, no matter what that instructional focus is, we always make sure to intentionally take it back and ground it in why we're doing this. What our beliefs are as a school site that drive forward our learning as educators and as adult learners. So just an example, the next couple are just going to be kind of clips from past PDs or staff meetings, or any opportunity we have to get together as a staff and ground our learning in shared values. We take every single one of those opportunities. So this was a few years back when our instructional focus area as a group was how to implement checking for understanding so that we can collect feedback and data from formative assessments. And again, when we talk about checking for understanding, it's kind of like, it's an academic phrase. It's an instructional method that we hear often, but it's never grounded in anything. And so when we, as a site, when we have already established those shared values and those beliefs that drive forward everything we do, we're able to make those connections. So if all students are gifted and talented, then checking for understanding, we would make sure to incorporate that thinking and processing time that a lot of our students need, if they're not just ready to go right off the bat. If all students have futures and everyone needs a teacher, then our checking for understanding components must include the fact that we should be checking in with every student, not those top 3 that throw their hands up immediately at the start of every lesson. And then this last statement is just one of my personal favorites. Every day is an opportunity to be the world's greatest version of myself. Again, connecting that to a checking for understanding component would be that as educators, we should be making sure to integrate or implement those checking for understanding opportunities throughout the entire period versus just at the peak of a lesson. So making those connections and making sure to intentionally take the time to discuss those connections is always a practice that we make sure to integrate at staff meetings and site PDs. And then just as a quick note, those checking for understanding components were created by staff so that we had an understanding of why it was relevant to us as educators. Scott, did you want to add anything before?
No, I think you're spot on. I think one thing to mention was when going through this process, we originally at Alvarado built the first two tiers of the kind of world's greatest pyramid in creating our core values and beliefs. And then once we did that, we started kind of building in the culture of significance where everyone matters. And so we did a lot of things with branding and all of that. A crossroads that we came to that you might come to is you do that for the school culture piece, and then you go off and do instruction completely separate of that. And that was kind of an aha moment for us. We were receiving a lot of pressures from outside of us in regards to what is your instructional focus of the year, what kind of practices are you going to be using, what types of programs will you be using. And so we're trying to figure that out. And there was a day where Jessica and I were doing some planning, and we stopped and caught ourselves and said, wait a minute, why would the values and beliefs and school culture and all of that be over here, and then the instruction be completely separate of that? Those should not be two separate things. That was the aha moment that we had, and we said, okay, from here on out, we're going to make sure that everything that we do, every instructional initiative, practice, method, whatever it may be, will be driven by our values and beliefs. And that was the moment that changed everything for us. And what you started noticing was in staff PD days, in different learning activities and experiences for our students. Now everything was anchored in these beliefs and values, and it always felt connected. So for our staff, it wasn't, here's the new wave of the month, of the year. For our students, it wasn't, okay, yesterday's work doesn't matter anymore. Let's get back, now we're moving on to today's work. Everything has been connected through those values and beliefs, and it is not separated. And so in a lot of places, you'll see that the school culture and the different types of celebrations and recognitions and whatever else it may be, and the instructional practices are two completely different worlds, and they never align. So what happens is in the classroom, you end up with students who are all in different places that really feel no connection. And through this, our big goal is to create a community of kinship. And once you have that community of kinship in the classroom, the learning takes off. So sorry, I just wanted to kind of throw that in there.
I'm so glad you did. The next couple of slides, just again, quick examples of how we make sure to make those connections. Because even though we might be in year 4 of this, the only reason it keeps going, the only reason we continue that momentum is because we build in those very intentional opportunities to hold these discussions. So I think the second that piece is forgotten or minimized, that might be where we have less grounding happening. So when we discussed as a school site, as a leadership team first, and then as a school site, what we could do, let me back up a little bit. When we had an opportunity to not allow for an instructional thing to drive us forward, but instead to choose an instructional vehicle that would carry our beliefs forward, we had a moment where we decided, okay, maybe one instructional vehicle that could do this, that could drive our beliefs and our vision forward would be to kind of consider methods that were used that would support student voice, student choice, honoring different gifts and talents. And as a site, we came across project-based learning. And again, taking the time to make those connections between our belief statements with the essential components of PBL. Those discussions as a staff have really kind of, again, as Scott had mentioned, it continues to give us opportunities to create that community of kinship as a staff as well. Another example, so looking at our instructional focus areas, always making time to kind of go backwards so that we can move forwards together. 2017, our focus on checking for understanding and formative assessments, what that looked like and how it tied with our belief statements. 2018, moving forward, we're looking at a vehicle to push us forward again and kind of navigating the world of PBL, but always making sure to connect those beliefs. Our current school year, our focus was authentic assessments, whether they be formative or summative, making sure that they honor student gifts and talents and support different strengths within the classroom. All of that has to be connected to our beliefs before we do anything as a staff, instructionally or otherwise. So making sure that we are continuing to blend different focus areas, but always also making sure that the foundation is with shared values and beliefs. Scott?
No, I think what you look at here is you'll see that over the course of the 3 and now even 4 years, there's always been something kind of new and it's always grown. But as Jessica just said, it's always grounded in our values and beliefs. And so I don't think, I hope that our staff doesn't always feel like it's a new wave or something new that is being asked of them or additional that is being asked of them, because everything comes back to those values and beliefs. And the other thing with this is, I think there's been a lot of just opportunities for flexibility and ownership with our staff, to, as long as they are operating within our beliefs and values, to find whatever, if we have beliefs that all students are gifted and talented, then I think we should have the same belief that all of our staff members are gifted and talented. And as long as they're operating through our values and beliefs, we want them to bring whatever gifts and talents they can to the table. If they have an instructional method or a practice that works best for them, bring it in. Let's do what you do best. And so I hope that it doesn't feel like there's always some kind of change for them, because it always comes back to this. So that's all I would add. Thank you, Jess.
So now taking it back to what BDL looks like. No matter what our discussion is regarding instruction, one thing that we make sure to do is to ensure that every, and it doesn't matter what the platform might be, whether it's a leadership meeting, an entire staff meeting, a day designated for professional development, we make sure to kind of bring in these design elements of BDL so that everything, once again, has the same foundation and it doesn't feel like another thing. I've had the opportunity to be a part of quite a few different staffs and different school sites. And oftentimes when there is a new focus area or a new thing, that's all it feels like, another new thing. And there's always discussion as to why are we doing this? Why is this the direction we're going in? And at Alvarado, with that foundation already being set, every fundamental layer that's built upon that has a reason for being there, because everything is driven by those belief statements. Everything is driven by that common lens and common language and common understanding that the staff at Alvarado shares. So the BDL design elements, no matter what decisions are being made within the classroom, driven by those belief statements, these are things that we always consider. Environment and relationships, how those are being created and maintained throughout the year, because oftentimes you'll look at those like icebreaker activities and they're very heavy in the beginning of the year, and then there's no focus that continues or is sustained throughout the year to understand how your students are growing and developing, not only as learners, but as individuals as well. Another focus area or design element of BDL are the soft skills that are supported throughout instruction that balance out the standards aligned skills. So it was really interesting. We had an opportunity to talk to a couple of students the other day, and when asked to reflect upon learning experiences, one of our students, she sometimes, you just talk to the kids and they say everything so much better, right? But one of our students was talking about how oftentimes when she sits in a classroom, she understands how it's not always about the content and the academic skills that are being focused on and developed. She is very aware of the soft skills that are being supported as well. So the idea of collaboration and communication, creative thinking, all of these soft skills that are sometimes dismissed because they're not a part of the pacing calendar. Another design element, again, driven by the environment that has been created and the relationships that have been built, is being very aware of your pedagogy and instructional methods. So when teachers are selecting which method is going to support my group of learners best, how can I utilize what I know about my students' gifts and talents to drive my lesson forward? Because again, the belief statement that says that everyone needs a teacher also comes with the understanding that the adult standing in the room is not the only teacher. So how can I utilize different student gifts and talents, and how can I use them to become teachers that support their peers as well? And then also the final design element that I'm going to talk about really quickly is just content selection. So choosing content that is responsive to what you know of your students gives them that ticket in. If we're talking about equity and access to instruction and material, oftentimes the content that you choose has a lot to do with it. So knowing that regardless of what your soft skills and standards aligned skills might be, content selection plays a huge part in inviting students into a discussion, giving them a seat at the table. Park, I totally took for granted how difficult it was to talk and control that remote. Okay, so what is BDL? It's quite simple for us. It kind of goes back to those design elements that I just talked about. BDL is creating a learning community, a community of kinship, just the way Scott had mentioned earlier, but that community of kinship that's driven by beliefs and values through what we call the 3 R's. So relationships that honor those gifts and strengths, that's founded on caring and empathy in the classroom, not only from teacher to student, but from student to student. The second R being responsive instructional practices based on student needs and the environment. And finally, reflective ongoing learning for all learners. And when we say all learners, we're talking about all student learners, but adult learners as well. So using every opportunity, all the time that we are given throughout the school year to make sure that as adult learners, we are constantly reflecting on the practices that are within our classroom and making sure that they are connected and grounded in the beliefs and values that we share as a site.
If I could jump in here for a second too, Jessica, it's been really interesting because in our own personal reflection on BDL, we've had opportunities to speak to different staff members individually about this, students about this, and in all of our conversations with them, without us even using the 3 R's, they somehow get to the 3 R's. So they always talk about the relationships and the community that's built in their classroom by their teachers. Over and over and over, we hear our students saying, our teachers care, they understand, they give us opportunities, they give us chances to work with one another. They reflect back on the everyone needs a teacher belief statement that we have. Our teachers regularly talk about how their practices need to meet the needs of their students on that particular day in that particular classroom. And then the reflective piece, we hear so much again from both of our students and our staff. Our students talking about if they didn't do well on an assignment, how they looked back at it, or on an assessment or whatever it may be, and then how they had that conversation with the teacher about it, and then came back again to the belief statement that every day is an opportunity to be the world's greatest version of myself. So they have those conversations based on those belief statements. They will go in and talk with their teacher and say, hey, I didn't do this very well. You know, I didn't do well on this assessment this time. I don't know what happened, or maybe have other reasons. And because there's that shared understanding and that shared belief, our teachers now offer multiple opportunities for revisions, for retaking a test or an assessment, because it comes back to that belief statement again, and because there is that reflective piece that both of them are going through. And then for our staff, just so often they are now, it feels like, because we have this set of beliefs that we all follow and that we all, adhere to, that they are now, we're all kind of putting away our fears and our insecurities, and we're just saying, hey, I could really use some help in this area. I really want to do this. Who's the expert on campus that can help me with that? So these 3 R's really kind of sum up everything that we do with BDL. So I just kind of wanted to add that, and it's, when creating these 3 R's, it was frustrating to try to figure out how these words were all going to fit. The magic of Park, again, pushing us and pushing us and pushing us. At the end of like a 3-hour session and saying like, we don't know, who cares? Put whatever words in there already. And then it came down to these 3 R's. And since then, all the work that we do, it always comes back to this without even trying. So this is this kind of is it. And so, yeah, I just kind of wanted to mention that.
Thank you. And listening to you made me realize that I hadn't touched upon the point that these 3 R's are not independent of one another. They drive each other forward. It's a constant cycle that has supported us to be more effective educators and for our students to become more passionate about what they're doing in the classroom, because there's a reason for everything that's happening in the classroom. I think sometimes it's very easy to see relationships being built in a classroom, and that being looked at as a very warm and fuzzy thing. But sometimes it doesn't play a part in what instruction and how that drives instruction forward. So knowing that all of this is connected, very similar to the way that all the fundamental layers of that pyramid are connected. Knowing that those values and beliefs have a place because they drive forward every other thing that's happening on campus. And controlling slides is not one of my gifts and talents.
It just takes a minute, Jess. Don't worry about it. You want me to try to control from here on out?
Yes. Okay. So a couple of questions that we asked ourselves as we're building those relationships is, how will I utilize the environment that has been created and the relationships that have been built, again, to enhance the learning experience? It's not only about knowing our students and understanding our students as learners, but how will that now impact everything I do as an educator? And how can I use this information to create opportunities to establish those roles for our kids that demonstrate our beliefs? And so here we have a couple of examples of how we make sure to continue that learning of the importance of those relationships at the adult level as well. So these are a couple of examples from a site PD that we had where we created an opportunity to hold something called empathy interviews, where our teachers were matched up with students who they may or may not have in their classes. But the point being to understand that student as a whole individual, to discuss strengths that they identify with, areas of concern that they may have expressed, what their passions are, what their interests are, what their curiosities are, to understand how can I better support a student like this in my classroom when I've got a million other things that sometimes maybe in traditional settings become priority. So always taking it back to those relationships, and then giving our teachers and staff members the time to interact with our kids outside of the classroom as well.
Yeah, one thing I want to note about this is on a staff professional development day, which is, usually happens on either a Monday or a Friday, and the students have the day off. so we had, over, I don't know, I think 40 students come in on this day. That it was their day off. It was an extended weekend for them. And when I was 12, 13, or 14, and I had an extended weekend, I think the last place I would have been was at school for sure. Unless I was on another extended weekend that I usually ended up on when I was in school. But on this day, we had students just give their time. They came in, and they begged to do it over and over again. And then as it spread, as this, knowledge of this spread, more and more students wanted to be involved. And the reason for that is because they truly want to be understood. They want us, the adults, to know who they are, what drives them, what makes them tick, how they can, how they best learn and understand certain things. And every time we have these opportunities, we just have lists of students who are ready to sign up and take part, to where we have to cut some out sometimes. It feels really bad, but it just kind of again shows that community of kinship and that community of learning and understanding, and growing together. So I really, love this slide and what it always reminds us of.
Absolutely. It's an empowering feeling for our students to know that they have a place on campus where the adults want to learn about them and to understand them as more than just a seat in the classroom.
I'm having trouble with these slides, so you're gonna have to go ahead and get back to it.
Okay, here we go. Just another example of how we make sure to implement the time to continue our adult learning and to understand our students a little bit better. So another activity that we brought onto campus called I Wish My Teacher Knew. And I mean, you can see how powerful some of these statements are. I wish my teacher knew that I hate it when they think of me as that kid, when they don't even know me. So a lot of our students, they're 12, 13, 14 years old. They're carrying a lot with them at this point. And so they enter a secondary school site and feel this weight of having to shed an identity that maybe they don't feel a connection to anymore. But that's easier said than done, right? Leaving old ways behind, or leaving labels behind that maybe they had never selected for themselves. I wish my teacher knew that I talk in class because I'm quiet at home. So understanding home environments and how that impacts our students as learners. And then making sure to bring that in again, as we had discussed earlier, making sure to bring our understanding of our kids and the relationships that we've built into our classroom as well. So how do our values and beliefs now drive the learning in your classroom? So you can see some examples from activities, from classrooms on site, of how our honor values and those belief statements are always connected to the things that are happening instructionally in the classroom. So you can see, I love this bulletin board, Honor Around the World, where this teacher selected individuals who had been on the news, somebody who had made an impact globally or within the community, and had our kids do the research to understand how those individuals demonstrated honor. And then of course, she included a reflective piece where they got to bring that in and connect as individuals as well. This is just going to be a really quick snippet from a Q&A session that we were able to have with one of our teachers. And he talks about how he makes sure to bring, again, those beliefs into his classroom to drive the decisions that he makes instructionally. Ooh, with no audio. Park, is this something you can help with?
Demonstrate that through this PBL unit, because I'll be presenting like one unit and they'll be like, the next day I'll come back, it's like, all right guys, I tweaked it, I revised it again, And then the following day, I was like, oh, you know what? I thought of a better idea. How about this? And then I'll ask them for their feedback. And most of them would be like, oh, yeah, that's pretty cool. Or then I would just take some of the students' work. I was like, hey, you know what? I just stole it off of Katie's stuff, and I thought it was really cool. So I'll project it on the board. And then I'll like, hey, let's all do this from now on. And then, or I'll see like Diego's like creation on Google Drawings. Like, all right, everybody's going to create new stars, like these Yelp stars this way from now on. Instead of just finding a picture from the internet and pasting it, you're actually going to create something.
Mm-hmm.
And then, just try to pull, as I see their strengths, I kind of want to show it off to other students and be like, this is how I can't do this, but I like it. Like, teach me how to do it.
I love that.
So
I love that. And how much that impacts. I was going to say how much it would impact a middle school student, but how much it would impact any human being, to see that their strength is being highlighted in that way. And then after being highlighted and recognized, the fact that that strength and talent can be used to support your peers it's what a beautiful cycle.
yeah, so I try to be like, hey, teach this person how to do this now. And then so on my PBL project, like on our website, like I'll put like a hall of fame of each page, and I have a name of students and then other students can go and click on their website to look at what they've done.
So just an example of how this teacher in a math classroom has been able to learn ways to use his students to identify themselves as teachers as well. Very powerful moment. And the reason, this happens regardless of content area, but the reason I mentioned math is because I think sometimes people have a very traditional mindset of what secondary math looks like. Scott?
No, I just, again, when you hear him talking about students understanding and building off each other's strengths in the classroom, one thing that I mentioned to him was when you walk into his classroom now, and it's very different than before, when you walk into his classroom now, there's this easiness. There's this, it feels like very safe. In a class where most students struggle in math. And when I walk in now, and I do it pretty often, you'll see students working with one another. You'll see one student getting up and walking across the classroom to go help another group of students. You'll see the teacher highlighting what different strengths students have within the classroom. And it's now become this community of learning where all of those barriers and fears and everything else that you'll see in any class, but definitely in a math class, have just kind of lowered a bit or a lot. And now you'll see like the learning kind of taking off and happening. So yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Taking it back to one of our BDL design elements where we make sure to reflect upon the instructional methods that we are very intentionally selecting for a lesson. Having his practices grounded in our shared beliefs has really switched up the traditional kind of sit and get that you normally see in secondary classrooms. And the instructional methods that are now being utilized are things like tutorials and critique circles and different things that help students, again, shed some labels and support each other with the strengths that they have. So this slide focuses on that connection between acknowledging, understanding, emphasizing relationships, and then now making connections to responsive instructional practices. Responsive teaching as student learners. So this is a chart that some of our kids created for the purpose of kind of supporting each other before a presentation, understanding what fears a student learner might have and how to use those fears to create a supportive reality.
Can I add to that one real quick, Jessica?
Oh.
With that chart there, I spoke to that specific teacher. I was in that class that day, and that chart was created specifically for 2 students that were in that classroom. Really just for one. because when going through this whole kind of project and assignment and experience that they were going through, she knew that one of her students would struggle with this. And she knew that if she didn't create this kind of community and this understanding amongst students, that one student would not perform. He would probably walk out of the classroom. He might punch the door before walking out of the classroom. He might throw something. And then what happened was they spent an entire day talking about this, building that community. And then what happened was that student almost outperformed all the other students during that learning activity, because she had set the tone. And so again, thinking about, she could have, I think it was a class of like 34 students. She could have written off that one student very easily and just, oh, well, he's not going to decide to join in on this. And, then it turns into he punched the wall or kicked the door or cussed somebody out before walking out of class. Instead of that, because she caught herself and took the time to go over this, that student ended up with a really good grade on this project. And then it built up his confidence to even move on and do more things throughout the year. So I just wanted to add that.
I'm so glad you did, because along with that, now the other 33 students are taking away soft skills that they will need in the future, and are also able to see that one student in a very different light. Again, just some more instructional methods that have been utilized to kind of create that community of kinship where students can support each other and understand each other as learners and as individuals. And then always, always, always making the connection and bringing in what we preach in the classroom with our adult learners as well. So using methods, this is a picture of one of our site professional development days. Just looks very different from your traditional PD. So making sure to bring in opportunities to engage with one another, to hold conversations that always bring it back to our beliefs and values, and to understand each other as well as continued learners, and building those connections.
Jaren, earlier you mentioned when we talked about taking something forward and something that might impact you once you move on from Alvarado, you talked about these panels. What things do you feel like, what have the panels done for you, and in what ways do you think you've grown as a person through your involvement in these panels?
Well, first off, I'd like to say that the panels are a really great platform for people who think great things, but they don't exactly know how to say them. So I think one could be on a student panel, in my opinion. Everyone's got something to say. So I think this experience will help a lot of people in public speaking and getting their voice out there. It's really what I think these panels are will help people with.
Thank you, Jaren. Thank you. And Jaren, there's something I want to say. You always reference the masses. Like, you always reference the inclusion of everybody, and how the things that we're trying to do include and involve everybody. It's not just cut for one student or created for one type of student.
These are a couple of our 8th graders who were reflecting on practices that have impacted them as learners and as individuals. And when given opportunities like this, the things that they can share with you and the impact it makes on the adults is tremendous. So he talks about how an activity that we utilize as much as possible, where we will bring in student panels to speak on different topics. He talks about how this has impacted him and has impacted his peers as individuals and as learners. And just a quick note, Jaren just happens to be a student who you could label as a successful student in a traditional setting. He would be able to kind of do his thing and achieve academic success, whatever that might look like at a school site. And the fact that he addresses the impact and the power of something like this, of hearing from all of his peers rather than the ones that he might typically be sitting with, is a beautiful thing. So this brings us to our final R in our BDL focus areas, reflective ongoing learning. Again, you've kind of seen examples of this at the student level and the adult level. A lot of our reflection that happens on campus and within classrooms is not only academic reflection, not only reflection on those soft skills that are being focused on within an instructional day. A lot of our reflection as students and as adult learners is also the belief section of it, the beliefs-driven reflection. So how did I use my gifts and talents to support my learning through a lesson or a unit? How did I take on the role of teacher? How do I carry this learning forward? How does this reflection help me when I have a new opportunity to bring my best? So always integrating those shared values and beliefs with every single one of those R's that we emphasize in BDL is absolutely necessary to kind of achieving this, to achieving a world's greatest, right? To achieving what we want to see in the classroom. So again, more examples of reflection questions. As a teacher, reflecting on experiences in the classroom, how do I design a learning experience that will give my students the opportunity to emerge different from how they entered it? As a learner, as a peer and a teammate, as a community member, a global citizen, just as a human being. So knowing that our educators and our students are asking these questions before, throughout, after an experience it just makes me feel very confident that everything is being driven for the right reasons or in the right ways. And then we have the student parallel of these reflection questions. They're asking themselves the exact same reflection questions that a lot of our teachers are asking throughout a learning experience. This is the last clip in our slides right now. This is an example of another Site PD day where we had a student panel. Our focus area for this day, and for actually this is what we have really been pushing this year, is what an authentic assessment looks like. And so we had a lot of our students speak about their experiences with assessments. And in doing that and hearing from our students, it drives us forward as educators.
Measure someone's capability, but obviously a piece of paper isn't worth that. I think students, like me, for example, is that we overanalyze the question and we think one thing, but we write the other. So once the teacher says it, grades it, they put a grade that obviously isn't what the student deserved. So I think teachers actually see them in different ways. Some actually just see them as a way to get to know the kid, and some others just see it to measure the kid. And I think we should use them as a better way of just understanding how they understand, because none of us think the same. Some of them think a lot different than other kids do. So I think teachers just have to analyze the way they ask questions too.
So a lot of times this becomes almost like an ego check for us, right? It takes us outside of ourselves and gives us more of an understanding of the reality. Sorry, I don't know what is going on. An understanding of the reality that our kids are experiencing when they sit down and go through a learning experience that has been designed for them, an assessment that has been designed with the understanding of who they are as learners. And those experiences, like the student panel or the empathy interviews or whatever that might look like, those experiences push us forward as reflective educators. So again, taking it back to the BDL design elements, I think you, hopefully, you've seen examples of each of these elements that are in this quadrant, in this visual right here. And these are, I'm looking at our time and I really apologize. These are just more examples of how we continue to build in reflective opportunities to drive forward shared beliefs and values, our work with soft skills, our focus in academic areas, and always, always building those connections very intentionally. So if all students are gifted and talented, I'm just gonna go through this first component in this wheel. If all students are gifted and talented, how do we build active roles for them within the classroom? How do we focus on skill development where their strengths will be utilized?
This here, I want to talk about real quick. This is, Park always talks about the magic of Jessica. And this is where, you know, along with so many other areas, but the way that Jessica is you know, is able to align this stuff for me, for our staff, our students, really connect everything, connecting how our beliefs drive everything that we do, and how to make those connections between something like our beliefs and values and the instructional practices that we do on campus. And I think it's been a huge help for myself, definitely, but also for our staff when trying to design certain learning experiences that are driven by our beliefs and values. And you saw those questions a little while ago. The way that she's able to kind of facilitate learning experiences through questions that are challenging but not threatening, it has made all the difference at Alvarado. And so when, you know, I really appreciate her walking us through this because it really does take a very intentional way of doing things.
Thank you. And then just one kind of final note about reflection. I think we, in our world of education, will oftentimes hear phrases like equity and access and the importance of student voice and choice and, you know, building relationships and all of this. But unless all of those things are being very, very intentionally designed and brought into the classroom, I don't know if it's enough to say it. We can walk into our classroom and create a lesson that we say invites more students to the table, but in reality, that might not be what our students might be experiencing. And so ensuring that we get a chance to hear from a group who we're all there for, they are the reason we are there, they're the reason we're doing what we're doing, that's the game changer. And I think, oh, and say just the way that wheel that you just saw right here, this visual was a reflective kind of process for our adult learners, always student parallel. So the teacher process reflection that aligns with the student process reflection. And I apologize for that stampede you hear in the back. My kids are back. And they're, okay. Gotcha. Somebody can take this over.
I think that's fine, Jessica. We can get, you know, be on this slide. That's fine. But again, it's focusing. She had there focusing on the process. What we look at a lot, and so what we want to emphasize is we are not a PBL school. We are a BDL school. And you know, what we try to focus on a lot is the learning process and all those steps along the way that really help. For our students to have a higher level of learning and understanding. That's what we're really here for. And that's kind of a little bit of what that slide showed there, but we're good. Jess? You're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott and Jessica, for just sharing tremendous insight and the content that you utilize to build a world's greatest school. So now over these last couple of webinars, hopefully we were able to create um, a structure for you so that you understand what it means to be a world's greatest school. And again, it's not I'm better than you, but it's an opportunity where everybody gets to be the world's greatest version of themselves daily, whether they're students, whether they're teachers, whether they're parts of their family, the significant adults in their life. So with that in mind, and if there's interest as you went through this and you take a look at the books, the series of the world's greatest schools, they're available on Amazon if you're interested and you want to find more. If you want to do bulk stuff either for students or for staff, please reach out to me and I can help you out with that. Our process of the Greatness Inside Out process, just to wrap this up, there are three areas. Is that if you ask what it is that we do, is that we create a culture of significance where everyone matters. And how do we do that? It's with these three categories. The first thing we do is we assess. We want to know what it is you do. We want to understand your beliefs and values, and we want to know who you celebrate, because that's going to tell us who's significant on your campus, who's important, who's really driving your values. Then the next part of this implementation process is to work with you to clarify your beliefs and values. And this is where the challenge comes, because this is very, very difficult work. And it's sometimes painful to be able to have this emerge. But once you get to that point, you can see the things that are happening at Alvarado. And then the last step in our Greatness Inside Out process is to align everything that you're doing so that it communicates universal language to where people understand that it's integrated into the learning policies, procedures, and your culture. And then it will definitely have, at least in California schools, will align and support these areas. So on behalf of Scott and Jessica, I just want to say thank you. If there's something here of interest, let's start a conversation. Reach out to us. You can reach me at park@greatnessinsideout.com. Shoot me an email and let's start a conversation if you'd like to learn more. If there's an interest and you would really like to pursue this, we can, we're in the process of putting some virtual workshops together to bring in your staff. If we don't know what it's going to look like as far as being able to come in and do PDs and those types of things, but we would love to talk to you about that. Now, we went way over our time allotment, and I want to thank you for those people who have joined us for these last 5 webinars. Hopefully we were able to provide you the insight and the greatness that can exist in our schools, because there are great things happening inside of all of our schools, and our team is about bringing that out. So if there's questions that you would like, please, we'll turn it over now to the question and answer. If you would like to ask us, please either raise your hand or use the chat room, and we will bring you in. Scott, Jessica, just before we close this out, anything you'd like to say?
No, you know what? Thank you for the time. Really enjoyed it. I hope that you were able to get something out of it. And as Park said, please reach out anytime you have, anything you may, need some assistance with.
No, echoing that, and also just thanking you for your time and for being here. This is obviously a great passion of ours to share the learning that we're experiencing and just the beautiful things that are happening.
One of the questions that came up is that will the PowerPoint be emailed? I will be sending out via email. They're already out. Sessions 1 through 3 are in the emails that I've been sending. I just need to make sure that you're on our email list. You should have received something yesterday that had the 3. Will be, after this follows up, we will be getting sessions 4 and 5. They are also on YouTube. So if you search Richard Parkhouse, and please subscribe to that if you have that opportunity, they are available there as well. Any other questions? We have people, that one came through in the chat room, or question and answers. So if you would like to reach out, please let us know.
Phenomenal session. What a great summary of all the pieces that they come together. Very impressive for sure. Certainly making a major difference where the system is in place, and it's a stellar system in my opinion. So Park, it's been phenomenal, and we appreciate it. To all of y'all, you're making it happen. It is greatness inside out.
Thank you, Larry. Appreciate it. Always great insight. Anyone else? Question? So I'd just like to be able to say thank you to everybody. Please, again, reach out to us if you'd like more information. We'd love to start a conversation with you. Scott, Jessica, closing words. Here we go before we sign off.
Again, thank you. Thank you for your time. Really appreciate you.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. And yeah, very grateful for the time that you spent with us.
Thank you, everyone. This concludes the webinar. Be safe, take care of yourself, and go out and explore your greatness. Thank you.